So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Carnegie Museum. We're delighted to have the opportunity to have a family who's been with a farm here since 1846, the year Iowa became a state. The Whittiker sisters are here, and we'd like to introduce Jean to my right, farther to my right, Sandy, who's a member of the board here of Carnegie Museum. We're delighted. And Sandy's husband, Roger. So let's give him a hand. When it comes to histories, people trace them as far back as they can remember and then rely on genealogy information centers. And it sounds like you've got some real history hounds in your family past. Do you mind telling us?
Well, yes, this great aunt started it in 1930, and it piqued the interest of a nephew and one of the Harvey Laughlin nephews, and he went with it, and he researched back to Ireland, where the first Laughlins that he could find were born in 1710 and came to America. And then 3 generations later, Alexander, great-grandson of the first Laughlin that came to America, decided it was too populated in Pennsylvania, and so started moving west.
Go to Iowa. Go west, young man.
Go west, yeah. And
Well, so they got here in time to, how many acres and in what township of what's now Jefferson County?
In the Locust Grove Township, and it was about 210 acres.
Okay.
And 80 of it was timber, the woods, and the other was cropland, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I remember my grandfather having. But I don't know whether there are additions.
Fair enough. Well, I notice up in the display case, every family once a month gets a display case for that month to tell their story visually, and it includes amazing things that they have found on the farm. We've seen arrowheads, thousands of years back. We've seen tools that are a couple hundred years old. We have seen things that we still don't know what they are exactly. Could you mind telling us what some of the things that are as far back as you can recall in that display case? I've seen single ears of corn drying hangers, kind of.
The corn dryer, the husking. They had when they husked the corn, they had this tool. I don't know what his real name is, but it took the husk off. And I read in Grandpa's journals, and the journals were mostly, it rained, or it's sunny, or I planted, or I harvested, and, told how many bushels he got, and he did it all by hand.
Wow.
Oftentimes, and farmed with the horses and that sort of thing. So, talking about horses, I have the horse collar, and Roger said when I brought home the horse collars, 2 horse collars. One was for the smaller horses, and one was for the workhorse, the big ones. And he said, "What are we doing with these?" We don't have any
Husbands would be
horses.
nervous that way.
I was afraid she had plans for me for one of them.
Here we go.
But anyway, I had it made into a mirror, and so I could have that good memory of my grandfather's
That's
having horses and so forth. So that was something in there. What else? Should have brought the picture.
I just remember seeing a lot of pictures, and I was amazed because I knew Grandpa's parents had come from England, but I mean, it was like the 20s, and there's Grandpa standing in front of a Hogan in Arizona. And I'm like, I knew the Brits traveled around a lot, and they clearly had that going because they had big families, and they went to visit their siblings and offspring, and it was amazing. But Grandpa was really, this isn't really historical, but he appreciated being recognized for doing things. And so in the 1954 caravan thing,
Yes.
he was proud of the fact that he was the oldest guy on horseback, even though he had to use a foam pad on the saddle because it was a little painful.
Now, you said this is the 1954 reenactment centennial of the very first state fair in Iowa, which was here in Fairfield. Second one was too in 1855. And so the reenactment, it recruited anybody who had a relative who was part of it. And so how many generations of your family took part in that?
3.
That's pretty fantastic. And I understand when he survived that 120-mile ride, he took note of it in his customary fashion. What did he write on the back?
He wrote 120 miles in 4 days.
Exclamation.
Yeah,
Age 76.
age 76.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
And my brother was, the grandson was much younger. I think he was probably
About 12.
12, so it was quite an experience for him.
I was mad because I didn't get to go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I do know that public television here in Iowa is going to feature a story about that very first Iowa, state fair, and so be looking for that. I think it's this summer. We'll double check on the timing.
I remember a story you told of your grandfather. We watched the moon landing. And he watched that on TV and remarked it when he moved here from Indiana, I think it was.
Well, he married in Indiana,
Okay.
yeah.
And they headed to Iowa before roads, and he'd lived to go from that to see a man walk on the moon. And he was aware of how much history he'd seen. It wasn't lost on him. Yeah, it was,
Fantastic.
I thought that pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, it's certainly remarkable to have relived one of those moments,
With him.
Yeah.
with him. Now, there are some other kind of repeat events. I think you talked about your mother teaching in.
And my great-grandmother, my T.A. Whittiker, Sarah Jane, who was the direct descendant from Harvey, the first man that, homesteaded here, was the daughter.
Speak up.
Okay. Anyway, I lost my train of
Your
thought.
mom, she
So,
was a
yes.
teacher too.
Sarah Jane was fortunate. She got to go to the seminary at Axline.
Yes.
And so she taught a couple of years, and then she married. And then my mother taught school, and I taught school. So, and you taught school 1 year.
Very briefly. It wasn't my idea of a good time.
Well, all
Being a
right.
lawyer is a good time.
Good for you.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. Axline Seminary was a female seminary here in Fairfield, well before one of the early attempts at higher education, well before Parsons College in 1875. So we're talking the 1850s here. Iowa was very young. The community from the very start has shown an interest in education, and several attempts were made to have higher education here in Fairfield before it finally happened for the 98 years of Parsons College. So your family's part of that. What township did your mom teach in?
Several. She taught in Locust Grove.
Yeah.
She went 2 years to Parsons after she graduated from Batavia High School. And then she taught at Buchanan number 3, and I don't know some others, but I can't tell you. And then I found just recently another picture, and it said Hazel Dell School, and I think it must have been in Wapello County. So I think she
I haven't
taught in a
heard of that one.
variety of schools.
There were 99 one-room schools here in our county,
in Jefferson County. Yeah.
and we're certainly going to honor anybody who went to one of those schools on June 24th out at the county fairgrounds. We know that one of our schools was moved there lock, stock, and barrel. That was Elm Grove School number 4, still standing. And the beams for that came from the Elm Grove down the hill, and that was 1866 when those beams were cut. They're sturdy to this day. And that's where the reunion is going to meet. We're going to have a reunion that day on Saturday, June 24th, for anybody who ever went to one of the 99 one-room schools here in Jefferson County, or taught in them. So your family's been part of that. We look forward to having anyone it's our first annual reunion for one-room school graduates, we'll call. Well, livestock, how long?
Well, the one I know the most about is Grandpa T.A. because I never knew Sarah Jane, but T.A. had cattle, pigs, some sheep. I've found pictures of all these things. Of course, chickens, and I raised all the farm crops and, corn, soybeans, and hay, a lot of hay. I can remember haying. That was Dad got to get in on that at times, and it was, of course, a super hot job, but so they did that.
Well, with the 80 acres of timber, what water supply for that timber was there?
A stream ran through that part.
There were at least 2 wells on the property,
Great.
because we've had them closed or filled, so, that's
And-
my recollection. There may be, no, there aren't, we've looked, and there's this was the 2, and they've been,
Okay, so it's one
Flood.
stream, 2 wells.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Sandy, you've allowed us how you didn't grow up on the farm, and we've got plenty of people that had moved to town by the time, this
My-
came around,
My parents were on the farm, but it was grandfather had 2 farms. He
Yes.
had the West Place, which is Harvey, from Harvey Laughlin, his
Okay.
mother. And the other one was the East Place, and so my parents lived at that East Place, and so my brother was born in 39, and so he was on the farm, and then I was born in 42, and I lived 3 months on the farm.
All right.
And I
Let-
don't
let the
remember
record
anything.
show.
Yeah. So that's why I don't really know,
Okay.
about the farm life as such.
Well, I really remember, I was this little kid, but it was fun to go out to Grandpa's, usually the East Place, because that's where he still had a summer house, and he was very proud of the fact that the East Place had been built this is what Mother told me, anyway, that it had been built in 1932, was the only house that was built in Jefferson County that year of the Depression.
Yeah.
But it was fun because, you could climb around on everything in the barns. I was afraid of heights, so I didn't climb very high on the silo. But I just remember Grandpa had put a box spring that didn't have any fabric on it, but he had chained it to branches of a tree, and so we could get in and push each other.
It was a giant swing.
It was cool. But he also grew strawberries, and there was a strawberry patch that I feel was about the size of this room.
Oh, my goodness.
And, as a little kid, at least I was closer to the ground, but it was hot. And, it's like, it made me sort of sneer at strawberries for years, not realize how good they were.
In 1835, the very first Army visitors who made their tracks through Jefferson County encountered the wheels of their wagons were red, and they at first couldn't figure out why. It was the dragoons, with Stephen Watts Kearny, who became famous as a territorial governor of New Mexico later on. And it was written down that they realized they could have cream from the cow they had brought along and strawberries. So way ahead of Wimbledon, they went ahead and partied big time with strawberries and cream all the way between here and Oskaloosa.
Wow.
So they picked the right time. So it grows well here. They grow
Yeah.
well here. I hope you like them now.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, yeah, any other memories of visiting Grandma and Grandpa, or stories that you remember?
Well, the other thing that he did that I thought was neat was his farm pond iced over. And And he came out at 76 and ice skated with us.
That's great, that's great.
That must have been a busy year for him.
He kept active, and he farmed well into his 80s, late 80s, and it was concerning, I think, to the family. But he wanted to do it.
Good for him, well, he
Yeah.
obviously could, that's great, that's a
Yeah.
great memory. Well, now, I mean, I guess Roger, you're the expert on what happens now on those acres and.
Expert might be a stretch.
All right,
Well, the 80 acres that remain, actually there's 81 more or less. 1 acre is not counted as the forest reserve because there's a building on it, and so it's separate.
okay,
But I just recently got an update on a forestry management plan from the district forester, Cassidy Robinson. And it gives me an outline on how to manage the timber ground. And there's the objectives, of course, are for improve the forest health and quality of timber production. And a little side story is 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we had a timber sale. We sold 200 trees. And I was kind of horrified when they started cutting them because
yeah,
it seemed like I was raping and pillaging the ground, But anyway, I got over it. It was the right thing to do. But so while the goal, one of the goals is to improve the quality of the timber production, the timber sale is a lot different than corn and beans. And I occasionally have a discussion with the tax preparer because sometimes she'll say, you need to show some income. And I said, well, this is not row crop. And so that's always been kind of a fun little thing, I thought, because we do show some expense and rarely show any income. And so
Trees are slow.
trees are slow, that's right.
and also it's also to improve the quality of the wildlife habitat and conserve the land for future generations. And you kind of do those with timber stand improvement, removing undesirable trees,
Right,
brush management. Iowa's not only a great place for strawberries, it's a great place for multiflora rose.
yes,
So it's a constant battle with that. And also then a prescribed burn is a third thing. And I've always been apprehensive about a burn in a forest because I always think, what happens if it gets out of control? And of course, you have to do your homework so that doesn't happen. I know Pete Tollner has successfully done several of those, and so someday he'll be sorry to see me coming because I'll be asking for help. So yeah, that's what the plan is for the 8 acres, is to improve the quality of the timber, habitat for wildlife,
right.
and improve it and then pass it on to and leave a legacy. And so,
Hey, we're the.
and it's also one of my good friends says, "Are you going out to your happy place today?"
Yeah.
And yeah, I am.
Every day.
Because it's
You have a variety of trees out there?
yes, yeah. There's about every tree that would be common to Iowa or the Midwest. Yeah, yeah. Oak, hickory. Used to be a lot of ash, a few walnuts, but yeah. And then elm and ironwood and stuff you don't really want, but yeah. So yeah, it's fun.
Okay.
There's a fairly large creek that runs through it, large enough that I've never seen it totally frozen. There's always been open water, so
Wow.
it's a nice wildlife reserve.
Yeah.
I see a lot of neat stuff out there. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Back in the day when the highway patrol had an airplane, they flew over the farm,
Mm-hmm.
and the highway patrolman told us or told somebody that they
Yes.
saw a giant herd of deer in the property,
Oh.
So we were keeping the wildlife good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Places to hide and what have you, I guess, during hunting season. Because they saw
Yeah.
lots of,
I've seen a badger out there.
Really?
Only one I've ever seen in a while. And the usual stuff, which is still exciting for me to see deer, turkeys. Some people have permission to hunt the property, and they've been telling me for years that there's pileated woodpeckers out there.
Really?
yes.
And for years, I thought they were mistaken. I thought didn't know what a pileated woodpecker was. No. But I finally saw it.
All right, so that's good. Any birders, any other birders here? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So this is like getting a Mickey Mantle rookie year.
Yeah.
Okay, it's this big,
And I told him probably why he didn't see it was he always had the chainsaw
Yeah,
in his
Mickey
hand and that probably kept the birds away.
they got out of there.
And they were sitting in the tree stands. Right.
Yeah, the guys that saw them, they would be sitting there for a long period of time waiting for game to walk by, and they would have a better opportunity to see them. And I was usually on the tractor or running a chainsaw or something. Yeah, but it's pretty exciting to see one in the wild. Yeah.
Well, in his later years, I remember the timber being kind of important. That was where we would meet, like the grandkids that were in this area. We would all meet in the timber and have picnics and stuff. I don't remember anything about food, but I remember that it was
Meeting place.
fun to be out
And pick
there.
up a lot of
Yeah.
hickory nuts and walnuts and that sort of thing.
Were there holiday special events where everybody gathered for?
Well, I'm sure they did.
But yeah, I
We
don't
tended by
remember.
the time we were, I think my parents were doing the entertaining at our
Okay.
house, the grandparents were older and so they came, but I'm sure they attended at the farm, so yeah.
I usually ask, and I don't mean to embarrass anybody, but when did the farm, if you have recollection, get indoor plumbing?
We've been talking about that.
Have you? Okay, good. I don't feel so bad. All right. Okay. So, any?
Partly because we aren't sure. We assume that the house that was built in 1932 had indoor plumbing. And it was still there when we were visiting, in the
50s and
50s.
60s, yeah.
But my mother told my husband that our older brother had to be changed, have his diapers changed, et cetera, that where they lived on the farm at that time, they didn't have running water. So we've been trying to figure that out. Well, if they were on the farm, we thought was it the west place? Was it the east place? We're not clear about
Which farm it
how
was.
this worked.
Well, how about electricity? That's the other one. Electricity came late to so many farms. The farther away from towns, the later. 1936 was when Congress passed the Rural Electrification Act, and the war got in the way. And so a lot of places didn't get it till after the war at all, and it's all the copper in the wires was needed. So I wonder if the stories or recollection yourselves.
Again,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's okay.
Yeah. I know I have a kerosene lantern, but I don't recall them ever using it, but I have a kerosene lantern. Didn't think of it when I thought of the display, but I have enough in there.
It's a great display.
No, well, I just meant,
You get school teacher, has always done the bulletin boards. Be sure to check it out. We're always grateful because every one of these looks nice. So where's Jim Stoner? Yeah, you're going to be in great shape. Sandy does all these. And the school teaching skills come in. I think it is true that we always kind of wonder, where did they go to church? Did they have?
Oh, that was very clear.
Okay.
yes. Something we read that Dad did when he was doing the genealogy for the Pioneer Certificate with the Iowa Genealogical Society he states that the Laughlin family helped start the Presbyterian church there in Cross Lanes. And there's a picture of it. It didn't have the neon sign. That was put on later, much later. But anyway, and in the records, he stated that there were Laughlins who were active in the church, and one was clerk for so many years, so they were really dedicated to that. And just catty corner from the church is Cross Lane School, which is still standing, but it's a storage. I think I see farm equipment in it
It's
or
corn
something.
crib.
It's farm?
Corn crib.
Okay.
Corn, all right.
A
Storage for
lot of repurposed schools among those
schools,
99.
yes.
Yep.
And I found a letter from one of my but anyway, from a relative who was writing her reminiscence of school. And she told about going to school on, she said she got to take a horse and buggy. Dad said he had to ride a pony, but this cousin got to ride a horse and buggy. And she said she rode it to the Cross Lane School, and the horse would stand in the shed all day waiting, and she said someone would feed it and water him during the day. And during the winter, when they took their lunches, they would freeze, the lunches. And so to get them warmed up before, lunchtime, they put them by the stove in the school and to thaw out. And so, yeah, she mentioned school days there. And that same cousin or niece of Sarah Jane said, this was something I didn't know. She said she remembered the house that is pictured there. And she said, told all about it, having the kitchen, the dining room, bedrooms, a parlor, and so forth. But she talked about the summer kitchen. And I do remember the summer kitchen. And my grandmother would do that in the summertime because they didn't have air conditioning at first. And so they had a stove out in the summer kitchen. And then in the wintertime, they had their stove in the kitchen, in the house too. But anyway, this cousin said about the house, and she said across the way was the log cabin. And I had never heard anybody speak of the first house as a log cabin, and it had one door and one window. And they loved it because it was like a playhouse because it was so small. Can you imagine having 10 children? And
Wow, yeah.
I'd want to separate.
And across the way.
Yeah, across the way, yeah, from the house.
Way
So,
is across the way.
yeah, so we don't know exactly where it was, but it was neat to know that we never knew where exactly, but it's there on the property where, not far from where the house stood.
Fantastic. Now, these letters, there's some handwritten, it looks like, and where did you come by these?
They were sent to my dad or to TA, and I tell you, it's been,
She's been working on this
An
forever.
archivist here. Yeah.
well, it's like, an archaeologist digging down. I'm going through papers and photographs and amazing.
She didn't make really clear that she and my older brother were both baptized in Cross Lanes
Oh, wow.
Presbyterian Church,
Great.
and
Our
our
parents were
parents were married there.
Oh, wonderful.
That's why I ended up putting the picture when they were married, because they went
Yes.
to Cross Lanes
That
and it
was
was
in that.
connected to Locust Grove.
Fantastic.
So it's a lot of
And
connection.
then it continued into the Presbyterian Church here in Fairfield.
Right.
One of my best friends from high school that I had not realized that a slightly different branch of the family lived just up the hill from where my other set of grandparents and uncles lived.
In the Locust Grove Township
Oh, my
again.
goodness.
And so,
Yeah, so I was like, I didn't figure that out until our 50th year graduation reunion.
Well, they didn't live on the farm, and,
Yeah.
we just didn't make
Hard to-
those connections, so.
So you both ended up coming into town for school.
And we went to all,
I
Yeah,
was
all the
already
way
in
through,
town.
right.
yeah.
So from kindergarten on,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
We were
You had
public
mentioned
school.
maybe being out there for one part of kindergarten or some,
No,
okay.
I would go sometimes when Mother taught in the country schools in the 50s. I went to some of the programs and
oh
things.
yeah, I remember,
yeah.
there were people that were Mother's students in the country school
That
who
were-
became my friends in town.
Mhm.
But
That's when they.
there was no busing then. I don't know
Back then.
how did they get the kids
Yeah.
into town?
Well, they did get on buses,
did-
didn't they?
They did bus, I don't know.
I think
They
that's
just-
when they had to.
We've heard a lot about buses in these events because there are a lot of times horse-drawn buses. That's where we heard about in the winters,
Mm-hmm.
especially the kids would be carrying warmed-up bricks to keep the lunches from freezing.
Yeah, I remember the Wilkeses.
Although over at the Elm Grove School number 4, there is a door on the heater. If you open it up, there's a little tray. And apparently that was the preferred spot. That was the major league.
Warming.
Yes, lunch warming spot that people fought over. So the teacher was in charge, as I recall.
And I've heard that they would warm bricks or stones
Yes.
and then put them
Under
in for warming too, yeah.
But that wasn't an issue. I did wonder when actual busing began. I don't know. It was around 1959 that the very last of the 99 was started to be sent in. Anybody here go to? Yes.
I was out at Beckwith, which is
Yes.
east of Britt.
Yes, sir.
And I did kindergarten roundup at this country school that was just a quarter-mile east of our farmhouse. And then over the summer, they consolidated, and I bussed in '63.
Okay.
The summer,
Interesting.
no, '59.
59.
59.
Yeah, 59 was.
63 is when Kennedy got shot. Never
That's
mind.
right.
There's
Yeah.
only a couple things I remember.
Okay. Well, that both.
Yeah, no, 'cause I was in third grade when Kennedy got shot. So I
Okay.
get back there. Yeah, that was.
So 59 seemed to be when the county said, "No, you're coming into town."
And I came to Washington. When I came into Washington Elementary, there was a three-story square brick building now as
Wow.
opposed to what it.
My brother come in, 58 or 59, and rode a school bus to high school then. I was 4 years younger, but
I moved to Fairfield in February of '58.
Okay.
Lived on a farm between here and Libertyville. Actually, the farmhouse was in the Libertyville School District. But the next year, '59, they were coming to Fairfield. So I had the option of either starting in Fairfield
Right.
in February of '58, or go to Libertyville and then start in Fairfield in August or September of '58. Yeah. And I chose to come to Fairfield because I didn't want to do the new school thing twice. And so I remember, like Jim says, that was, at least for Fairfield, they started busing kids to Fairfield then. Because Lockridge and Libertyville both came to Fairfield at the same time.
Yeah, I think, because I went to one country school through 8th grade, and I was done in the spring of '58, and I rode a bus then in the fall.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long it had been. And I know that was the year Lockridge started,
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
the high school
Mhm.
came into Fairfield.
Yeah, that's my remembrance. 'Cause I was kind of terrified to go to a brand new school. I didn't want to do it twice. So.
Yeah. Nope. Efficient decision.
Yeah.
Well, it is true. I mean, we often may not think of Iowa as being the biggest in the country. We had the biggest number of one-room schools of any state in the United States. Simple as that. And it was mandated by the state legislature, and that's why there are so many families who either had parents who taught in them or went to them or both, and some of us. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask Roger what the odds were if he went to Libertyville to start high school that he would have married a different girl. Didn't you start dating like in early high school or something?
Well, actually, late high school, because I didn't get here till I was a junior, really.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well,
But yeah, we
might
saw-
have found another girlfriend.
You anticipated
Yeah.
a question, it's gonna come up, okay. When did you meet? You gotta tell us.
Yeah, he asked a question.
Oh,
Follow up.
Well, that's-
Yes. Thank you.
yeah, that's, ask Sandy.
Okay. Well,
Because as far as when
Jason
we
can edit
actually,
anything in or out that we
Man,
need to do. That'll be okay.
we were in school together. I
Yeah.
don't know as far as a light bulb flash, lightning strike move when we met. I don't remember that.
Okay.
But maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I was gonna say. Upstairs, I was talking about these things. I said, I will be Switzerland in this entire case. Cordial and neutral. So just, no, that's all right. So if you met back then and you were in classes together,
Yeah.
all right.
Classes together, choir, band, yeah, those things together.
Fair enough. That's good. Well, people have memories, and I know that sometimes it's memories of what somebody else said rather than direct personal, memories. And in some ways, the farm acreage, that Grandpa and Grandma lived on was a visiting memory for you. Are there any other memories that stand out from those occasions of them talking about it, or are you visiting there and experiencing it firsthand?
I think I remember Grandpa Whittiker wasn't afraid to travel, and I marveled, excuse me, when I went through all these boxes and boxes of pictures. I'd coming across pictures and then came across a little journal, and it said Oregon trip, and it was 1912. And my Uncle Darrell was 9 and my Aunt Hazel was 3, and my grandmother, and he toted them, or didn't tote them, but took them out, and he had a sister, yeah, Sarah Jane's kids, my granddad, that makes me think, had 10 children, and 2 of them died, and 8 of them ended up Wisconsin, Nebraska, Montana, California, Oregon. I mean, they had places to go and things to see.
Yeah.
And
And they did.
Grandpa took them out there, and my Uncle Darrell loved that trip, and he wrote in his diary, or journal, about the cowboys and, how he loved it. And I showed Gene a letter he had written in 1912 telling Grandma about being at Uncle George's, and Uncle George had killed an owl. And,
Tell the Fish and Wildlife Service.
yeah, my sister worked for Fish and Wildlife. That's a no-no. And
It's also our
anyway,
logo for our museum, Doug.
yeah. But I don't know the incident. But anyway, he said that, and then he had killed rabbits. Papa killed rabbits, so they must have had rabbit for dinner. And it was 1912, and that was, amazing. But they went to Montana, and the cowboys on the cattle ranch that that aunt had and her husband, and the cowboys really fascinated Uncle Darrell, and they gave him rattles from the rattlesnake, and he treasured them. He kept them all his life, and then when he was married, he and his wife's first home burned down, and the thing he couldn't replace were the rattlesnake rattles. And he told me that story, so I know it meant a lot to him to miss that. But they had pictures of them in Oregon, and grandmother is washing the clothes in a wooden kind of bucket or, barrel or something, and then hanging it on the line, and she has long dress back in the day, and I thought, how did you do that? No automatic washing machine. But they, and grandfather T.A. continued to travel well into his 70s, 80s, you know? He went to
Yeah,
California.
that's right.
He
Wow.
went to see family.
Well, and I think Daryl went to Arizona. I mean, Daryl and Cecil, the
Traveled.
oldest of his
Wintered there.
kids, went to Arizona in the winter. You know, he was a snowbird after he retired from farming.
They just, yeah.
Well, you mentioned, Gene, that they seemed to go to be together as well as
Mhm.
just
Oh,
friends.
yeah.
Yeah, family
So
was
that
important.
close family far apart.
And I had reunion pictures there too,
Ah.
that they, you know, they would have
There's a
Laughlin
question
family
up there.
reunions, so.
Yeah. Question? Yes, sir.
Did they mention how they traveled? Was it by train?
You know, I really don't know, and I've often wondered. I would have thought train, because I remember Daryl said something about Margaret, his Aunt Margaret, who had the cattle ranch, came and got them in the buckboard.
Wow.
And, you know, they went out, and
So
the ranch was near the Montana Canadian border. So they were way up there, and I don't, you know, but they went in the summertime, so,
Pretty fantastic.
yeah, they like to travel.
Well, this was the first spot for some, but it was the second or third, it sounds like, when they came from Pennsylvania and Tennessee.
Mhm.
And then many kept going.
Yes, yeah.
So we were the frontier at one stage, and then people moved on to the next frontier.
Yeah. So there aren't a whole lot of Whittikers, you know, here. I mean, a lot in California, Oregon, Montana. No, not Montana, because they
Well, in
Didn't have any
Wisconsin,
job.
because
In
we
Wisconsin.
did,
a little mini reunion there.
yeah, with one of.
With the youngest of TA's family in Wisconsin.
Would that be an aunt or uncle? Wait, TA was grandpa?
Yeah, that was
Okay, got
Grandpa.
We didn't mention the one of Grandpa's siblings that I really interacted with and got to know. He was sort of a curmudgeonly guy, Uncle Ben, and he would kind of just show up, put stuff in his mouth, offer it to me.
Oh,
I'm
great.
like 9, you know?
Hey.
And then we played caroms. And people looked at me like, what is that? But it was cool. He was just a kind of entertaining guy. I think at that point he must have been divorced.
He was a widower.
And he did stuff like he lived in Wisconsin, and he tried to take a trolley, sort of, and turn it into his, like, you know, like a double wide, except but I mean, it was Wisconsin, winter, and his family thought he was totally nuts, but he was fun.
They always talk about every family having a crazy uncle. So, you know, on schedule. That's great. Well, you kind of get a chance for last remarks. Anything that, do you feel like you're a farm family, a farm heritage family in a sense?
Well, I'm just glad Dad,
Yeah.
when my grandfather passed away, his siblings, you know, they have to all agree, and they wanted to sell the farm. And I'm glad that he and my aunt decided, oh, well, Dad didn't want a farm,
Right.
you know, because he was retired. But he hated to see it go.
Yeah.
And so he and his sister said, well, we'll buy the timber and that 81 acres of timber. And then they sold the cropland. So I'm glad that they kept that that it would have been gone, you know. And that happened on the other side, the maternal side of the family. It was a heritage farm, but they sold that because Mother didn't want to farm either when her father, you know, passed away. So I'm glad for that.
Yeah, and actually, Dad and Hazel keeping the timber sort of facilitated the next bit, because even our kids, I mean, we would go out and glean in the cornfields to get corn and
For the squirrels.
yeah, to feed squirrels.
Very good.
The city folk do that. Well, we do too, you know, but we were glad that they kept it. And then my aunt lived in Des Moines, and she didn't want to keep it long, so Dad just bought out her share, and I'm glad that, you know, that it continued. And our kids I don't think they want us to sell off to, you know, we've been asked, but we're not.
We often think, but don't want to ask if it's, you know, an issue. If the next generation up is interested, have they
Yeah,
expressed?
they're interested. They want us to build a cabin.
Ah,
I want a tiny house out at the farm.
we
Yeah,
got plenty of wood for it.
yeah,
And there was one, if you could find a foundation,
yeah.
anything.
Find that log cabin.
Yeah.
Sandy, are you familiar with the Studebaker story? It's kind of a landmark around Jefferson County.
The one that,
Dad.
I think it has to come
Bonnie
out.
and Clyde stopped there, didn't they?
I can maybe tell that story.
Okay, better hear it.
I don't know how many years ago, but Sandy's and Jean's dad had an old Studebaker. And he'd driven it for years, and it was on its last legs. And so he drove it out to the farm and parked it there to be used as a hunting blind. And of course, it still sits there, and there's not a speck of upholstery left in it. And over the years, it got a lot of holes in it. And I remember your dad saying, "Who would want to shoot holes in that old car?" And I didn't want to tell him, but his grandkids put a lot of them.
An inviting target.
Yeah, it's right, like Pete says, it's a reference point when you're going to go back into the timber. Yeah, well, you go to the Studebaker and turn right or something.
maybe we should uncover it for Andrew's benefit.
Yeah.
My oldest child really loved cars, and he had heard about the Studebaker. I don't know what context, because I kind of got like this second or third hand. But one time when we were visiting, and I think this was probably after Grandpa had died, but when we were visiting, somebody said something about the Studebaker and how, maybe this is Andrew's chance to see it, my oldest kid. And my mother was like, "No, I don't want him to see that. He'll be horrified."
With the holes in it.
It looks like the Bonnie and Clyde car.
So Roger said when we got the property, he was having some things taken,
There were
away for
a
salvage.
few other old
things,
cars sitting
yeah.
around back in the
And
ditch and stuff.
so he asked the farmer who it happened to be on his property. It hadn't been originally, and so the farmer said, "Oh no," he said, "that's a hunting blind." So it's still there.
Yeah.
And it's not on our property.
No,
It's
okay.
just beside it.
Yeah.
So,
How that
it's
happened.
yeah, that does.
Well, it neither raises nor lowers the tax rate,
Yeah.
That's true.
so that's good.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Very
we're
true.
grateful that your family came here in 1846, the year Iowa became a state, and that the trees still grow there.
Yeah.
And that you,
and new ones are planted.
all right. We want to thank the Whittiker sisters.